Hello, what's up everyone? Welcome to this new live stream where you're going to learn how to get started using the framework Swift Data. So Swift Data, as of the moment where I'm doing this live stream, so if you're watching the replay, the live stream was in April 2024. So as of right now, Swift Data is a fairly recent framework in the iOS ecosystem because it's still less than 1 year old because the framework was only announced last year at WWDC, so in June 2023. I had actually done a first piece of content around Swift Data the day following the announcement, where it was just about discovering and exploring Swift Data. Back then, Swift Data was still very new. There wasn't a lot of good resources about it, and even the framework itself still had a lot of issues because it was the first beta of the framework. Things have changed quite a lot over the following month. Swift Data got its first official stable release in September, if I remember correctly, because it was shipped as part of iOS 17. And actually, a few weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago, something like that, Apple released a series of new tutorials on how to get started with Swift, and I saw that there was one full chapter about how to get started with Swift Data. So I figured this is the perfect way to talk about this framework during a live stream. So what we're gonna do is that we're going to follow the tutorial, and then depending on the time that we have left, maybe I will try to see if there is one or two features I can add in order to go further. So if you want to check out the tutorial, the link is in the description of the YouTube video. If you're watching live on X or on LinkedIn, you will need to go on YouTube to find the link of the tutorial, but we're going to cover it together anyway. Last thing I wanted to say before we get started is that if you're watching live, remember that you have a chat at your disposal and that you can ask questions, make any remark that crosses your mind. I will do my best to try and answer them. And that being said, let's get started. So this is the tutorial we're going to use. So it's part of the new tutorials posted by Apple something like 2 weeks ago at the end of March, called Develop in Swift Tutorials. And they really start at the beginning. You can see that we have SwiftUI foundations, even Explore Xcode, views, layout, buttons, list, text fields. So really, the basics of how to create a SwiftUI app. I won't cover this part today. Maybe I will cover it in a future live stream. I will actually most likely cover it into a future live stream. But for today, we're going to be interested in this part right here, which is about data modeling. Because I didn't mention it, but Swift Data, as the name suggests, is a framework to handle data. And by handle, I mean in the sense how to persist data that will be saved both across launches of your apps, but also I think across devices, because I think that Swift Data supports syncing data through iCloud. We'll see if we will see whether the tutorial mentions this more advanced use case. So let's start with chapter 1, models and persistence, where we're going to build a list of our friends' birthdays and use Swift Data to save and retrieve that data across app launches. So let's start with first chapter, welcome to data modeling. I see that I'm covering a bit the what's being written, so let me make myself a little bit smaller so that I don't hide the text, because that's what's the most important in this live stream. So welcome to data modeling. Learn how to represent real-world concepts as models in code, so how to create a database, basically. Develop in Swift tutorials will teach you all you need to know about building relational data models with Swift Data. So if you know a bit about relational databases, you can see that we are in familiar territory. So what are we going to learn? We're going to learn how to model our own data types in Swift to represent real-world concepts. So that's the big advantage, the big promise of Swift Data is that it allows you to model your data in Swift. So just like in SwiftUI, you implement all of your views in Swift code and you don't need to deal with storyboards. with Swift Data, you implement your data types also in Swift, and you don't have to deal with a file to represent your data model like you would have needed in when using core data. Even though, as we're going to maybe see or not, but Swift Data is actually a higher level of abstraction above core data, but Swift Data uses core data under the hood. Maybe not for everything, but for some part, it uses core data under the hood. So we learned the fundamentals of Swift Data, which you can use to power apps with any kind of data you can imagine, and how to work with Xcode previews to design an interface around your data model. That's going to be very interesting because when we tried Swift Data back in June of last year, it wasn't working at all with previews, and so as you can imagine, that was putting a strong limitation on what you could do. So first, about data modeling. Data modeling is the art of representing real-world concepts as models in your code. You have already had some experience with this in SwiftUI Foundation, so I guess they showed an example, for instance, of parsing a JSON file, because a JSON file is also a kind of data modeling. When you roll dice in the update the UI with state chapter, you modeled a dice using a single number. Similarly, you modeled a group of your pals as an array of strings in create dynamic content, so chapters that we haven't covered, but you can imagine what they were about. But as you might remember, if you added a list of friends in the simulator, the list was lost each time you ran your app. The pick a pal app forgets its list of names because it uses a addState property to manage them. That's fine for a prototype, but people expect apps to remember the data they're working with. And suppose you wanted to track how many times each friend was chosen in pick a pal, doing so by adding another array of built-in types would be cumbersome. To take your app to the next level, you can create your own model types that better express your data and the relationships between them. Then you can add these models to Swift Data to get a powerful data store that persists data across the many times people open your app. And you can see from the italics that persistence is the keyword here. Swift Data works with SwiftUI to manage a two-way connection between your views and the data they rely on. So one of the big features of Swift Data is that not only does it persist data, but it also takes care of updating the UI just like the addState property wrapper does. So what are we going to need? We're going to need familiarity with the fundamentals of Xcode Swift and SwiftUI as covered in the previous chapters, but I guess that you already know this if you're watching this live stream, and a Mac running macOS Sonoma or Ventura. So I'm running Sonoma, it should be fine. And they said you don't need an iOS device because we can use the simulator. So next chapter is going to be about saving data. So let's go into this chapter where we're going to explore data modeling for the first time by building an app that displays your friends and their birthdays. We're going to start by creating a model to represent the data, then integrate with the Swift Data framework so we can save data between launches of the app. Hello Nugoodniks, hello Claire, nice to see some familiar names in the chat. So section 1, create a new project. So we need to start a new project in Xcode. So I've already prepared this actually. I'm already on the screen to create a new iOS project, but maybe I will need to choose a different template. That's why I didn't go further than this screen. So let's see. They say new project, and they don't seem to mention a template in particular. So, okay. So it will just be an app. Yes, an app like that. So we need to call it birthdays. So let's do the same thing than what they're suggesting. And you can see that in storage, we need to choose none. Okay, that's interesting because, okay, so first let me put SwiftUI, Swift, and you can see that you can pick Swift Data, but I guess they are making us build the whole stack from the ground up, which is quite great for tutorials. So I'm pretty happy that they are making us do it because it's the opportunity to learn what each piece of the architecture of the technical stack does. And that's something that you don't necessarily get when you have a template that is already made for you. So we are leaving storage set to none. All right. So I guess now we can create the project. Okay, just putting it on my desktop. All right. So we have the app being created. Okay. I'm gonna hide the preview for now. I will put it back when we need it. And so now we're going to create a new type to represent a friend. So make a new Swift file and create a friend type to hold a name and a birthday. So let's do that. So Command Shift N to create, no, Command Shift N is to create a new project. I just wanted Command N to create a new Swift file, which we're going to call friend. If I can manage to type it correctly, all right. And so we're going to create a struct called friend. And inside of it, what are we going to put? I see a question. What exactly is Swift Data? Short answer, it's a framework to handle data persistence in Swift. So similar to frameworks like Hibernate, for instance, in the Java Android world, or similar to Realm also, that also exists for iOS, but also for other platforms like Android. Will you show Swift Data asynchronous load and save, which doesn't block the main thread? I would hope that they will show us how to do it, but we'll see what's gonna happen in this tutorial. But I would hope that they will show us how to implement properly Swift Data, because blocking the UI doesn't seem like a proper implementation at all. So we'll see what they're going to make us do. So I've created the struct, all right? And they say, notice the difference between the Swift UI view files you've worked with before and this Swift file. The front file doesn't have a body or a preview. You'll use the front struct for storing data, which you'll display in the content view. So it's a basic data type, something that you're probably already familiar with if you have used Swift before. Then we create two properties, one to represent the friend's name and the other one to represent their birthday. And you can see that we use the type date to represent a specific point in time. This way, we are already dealing with not a special case, but something that is a bit more complex than an integer or a string. So let's add this. So let name, which is a string, and let, I think it's birthday, which is gonna be not data, but date. So make sure you use date and not data, because it's very easy to make a mistake here. All right. Then inside the content view, they ask us to declare an array of friends. All right. So let's go in the content view. I'm gonna resume the preview, and I'm gonna try and make it so that you can see it, and also make it dark mode. It will be better. So okay, you can see the preview. Just gonna make it like that, dark appearance. Yes, that's better. All right, so I'm just going to copy and paste because it's gonna be easier and there is less risk of me making a stupid mistake. Okay, with a bit more room like this. So we have an array of friend, all right, and it's annotated with @state. So when the value in the property changes, the body of the view will be recomputed. Okay, then we are putting some values inside the array. So first friend inside the array, so like that. Let's see what they say. So they say use the friend initializer to create sample data for the preview. The sample names in this project are only suggestions. Make it your own by using the names of people you know. And date.now captures the exact moment that the code runs. Okay. So here we have a default value. You can see this really as a default value, I guess, because it will probably be overridden by data actually loaded from the persisted data model. So for now, I have the same code. And then they say create another sample friend with a birthday in the past. And they give some context about how date works. So a date is stored as seconds past a fixed reference. So something that's also called a timestamp. And the start of the year 1970 is one of those reference dates known as the Unix epoch. So actually, we are putting the birthday as 1st of January 1970 at midnight. Okay, so let's copy this second element to put into the array like that. All right. Then next step is replace the body code with a list of friends and use the name property as the ID of the friend. All right? So you can see we are declaring a list. So be careful, it's a list in the SwiftUI sense of the term. So a scrollable vertical list, which is going to display several rows, and each row will contain the information about a friend. And so a list, it's a view that allows you in SwiftUI to iterate over a collection and also apply some basic formatting, like putting a separator between each row in the list, this kind of thing. And also, if data changes in the array, the list will take care of automatically animating the differences, like data being inserted, removed, an item changing index, that kind of updates. Okay, then we start populating the list by displaying each friend's name. So we put an H tag inside the list, so like that. Just going to reformat the code, and you can see that in the preview we can see the list appearing, so with the two friends being displayed in the UI. All right, then we display the friend's birthday using the day, month, and year. So we have some information about this syntax right here, which I hope that I'm not hiding it. I might be hiding it a bit, so I'm going to copy the code into Xcode so that you can see it. So putting it like that, also reformatting everything. Actually, I'm going to put it like that. This way it will be easier to see. So we have in a text the friend birthday, and for the format we say date time and then the month in wide, so in full letters, the day and the year, and then this gets localized in a way that makes sense according to the locale of the user. If you've never seen this API, it's an API that was introduced in iOS 15 to have a more of a declarative way to write how you want to format dates, but not only dates, because you have a similar API for numbers, for arrays, collections in a general. So it's quite an interesting API. Actually, I've recorded a video about this API this weekend, and it will be released in the coming weeks. So it's nice to see this API being used here, and it's a perfect use case for it. So we can see the dates, the birthdays are now being formatted in the preview. And so we have some context about the syntax, which is the format declaration is semantic. You specify the part of the date you want to display and let the system render the text according to the device's current calendar. Because in addition to the local, indeed, I guess, for instance, user in Japan can have the Japanese calendar set up, and it's a different calendar than the one we use in Europe, which is the Gregorian calendar. And in the note, they say, depending on where you are in the world, you'll see either January 1st, 1970 or December 31, 1969 for Jenny's birthday. These are both representations of the exact moment of her birth. Which one you see depends on the time zone that you're in. So if you are in UTC plus something, so to the east of England, I guess you will see January 1st, 1970, because I'm in UTC +1 or +2, and that's what I see. But if you are in UTC minus something, so if you are in the US or in America, I guess you should see 1969. I don't think there is an easy way to force the local on the preview. Can I do it right here? For instance, if I do like environment, do we have something for the local? Yes. You know what? I want to try it. So local identifier, and I'm going to do, I don't know if EN-US is a valid one. So yeah, but it's not the time zone. I have the local, but not the time zone. I need to change it's the calendar actually. I need to change. So it would be the calendar. How can I change the calendar? Can you create a calendar? What are the identifiers possible? Let's see. Okay, so let me put the Japanese calendar, for instance, because I was mentioning it earlier. So Japanese calendar gives me the same date. What if I put Hebrew calendar? Same thing also. So I guess I might not be using the right property to override this. And how can I override something like? So I was looking at the local. I wanted to check like, oh yes, the time zone. Maybe that's what I want to override actually. So yeah, so this is seconds from GMT. So if I put 0, and I guess I need to also force unwrap it. Okay, so this is UTC 0. So if I am like 2 hours, it would be plus 120. And if I put it a negative, okay, I still don't see a change. So maybe actually, I'm thinking maybe I'm not using the right way to override this. Or actually, I'm thinking what might be happening is that I'm correctly overriding the environment, but maybe this right here doesn't use the value from the environment, but rather the value set at the device level. So you know what? I'm going to drop it because I don't want to lose too much time on this. But if you want to try it in the actual simulator, you can try to actually change the time zone in the simulator, and normally you should be able to see a difference. Let's go back to the topic at hand. So now they say embed the list in a navigation stack and use the navigation title modifier to display the title birthdays at the top of the screen. So good way to do that is to simply select the code like this and then start typing a curly brace, and it will automatically embed it into curly braces, and then you can do navigation stack like this. And the navigation title, remember, you need to call it inside the stack, so on the list. So it's going to be navigation title, and it's going to be birthdays. And we can see it appearing in the preview. So navigation stack is often used to stack views on top of each other. So it's the equivalent of a navigation controller in UIKit, like a stack of cards. Only the top view is visible at any time, and you manipulate the stack by adding views to or taking views of the top of the stack. The primary purpose of navigation stack is navigation, but it also offers functionality like navigation bars, buttons, toolbars, and titles. So like this title that's being shown, because if I remove the navigation stack like this, what did I do? No, I meant to do it like that. If I remove navigation stack, you can see that navigation title is still defined, but there is no view to consume it and display it on screen, and so it's no longer appearing. And as an experiment, they say scroll the list and title up. You'll see the title move into navigation bar. Yes. So if you scroll like this, you can see that the large title gets moved into the navigation bar. That's one of the features, one of the nice features of navigation stack that is offered for you out of the box. All right. So let's keep on moving. I see we have a few people watching from the American continent. So I guess if you run this code, I guess you should be seeing maybe a different value from for the year, for the actual date, because for the day, month, and year. So maybe when you try it, you will see a different value. Okay, now it's time to enter data. So we're going to create a user interface for entering friend data. We'll build an area at the bottom of the screen to add your friend's birthday, then create a new friend and add it to the list. So UI that seems quite similar to, for instance, the reminder app, where you can write something and add it as a reminder. So the step one is gonna be to declare 2 new add state properties to contain the value for a new friend. So in a real app, I guess maybe you could create a dedicated view for this. Here they choose not to do it, which I guess makes sense because it makes everything easier to follow. You know what, I'm going to move this a bit because I'm covering the code a bit and there is nothing on the left, so I'm going to move the view a bit. I think that's better. So we are declaring these two add_state properties. I'm saying this that in a real app, you would probably move this to a dedicated view because you can see that we're starting to add a lot of responsibilities to this content view. It displays a list. It also allows you to create a new item of the list. So that's why in a real app, you would probably if the addition is complex, add a new view that you present modally, or if it's very simple, then allow the addition inside the main view. But apps that do that are quite rare. I was mentioning the reminder app that does it because adding a reminder is as easy as writing a few words, but in most applications, you would rather have a dedicated screen in order to add some new piece of data. Especially because most of the time you also want to validate the data that is correct, and so sorry. And so when you need to validate data, then you need to display errors, and this starts to compound in complexity quite easily. And so having a dedicated view can be a better alternative. But let's stay with our approach. So I add two add_state properties to my content view, one called new name and another one called new date. All right. Actually, it should even be new birthday. I think it would be a better name for it, but we'll see. Then we use the modifier safe area inset edge bottom to pin the new friend entry UI to the bottom of the screen below the list of friends. And so safe area inset is going to anchor content to the top or the bottom of the screen. And so it's called a safe area in the UI sense of it. So the part of the UI where it's safe to display content because it's not going to be overlaid by another piece of UI. For instance, when you display something at the bottom of the screen, you want to make sure that it's not too low because you don't want to have the navigation bar at the bottom that allows you to go back to the springboard to interfere with it. So that's why this modifier can be useful. So let's use this modifier. So we add the modifier safe area inset at the bottom of the list, like that. So for now, it shouldn't do anything because there isn't anything to display pinned to the safe area, but we're going to add this because then we're going to start writing the data entry UI with a VStack that spaces out each element and contains static text. So let's copy and paste this VStack. So it looks like this, and we can see it appearing here. Maybe I will put it back into light mode to see if we see it better. Yeah, no, it doesn't help that much. So I'm going to keep it with dark mode. Actually, I'm moving it a bit so that I don't cover it as much. All right, maybe moving it a bit also like that. Yeah, so that you can see everything. All right, let's go back to the tutorial. And then they say that we add a date picker, so a component to choose date values, and the text field for the friend's name. The closure following date picker contains its label. The new birthday title describes what goes into the date picker just fine, so use the label to display the text field. So what we're doing is that we're putting the text field into the date picker, if I understand it correctly. I guess it will be even clearer when we see how it all looks like. Let me align everything. Okay, so I guess it will be better if I put it in light mode. Yeah, so you can see, yes, you can see. So let me also move it a bit even more, so like that. So here we have a text field to enter the name of someone, and then we can pick a date for the birthday. You can see that we can also pick the time. Maybe it's not needed, so maybe they will make us remove it just after. So let's see what comes next. It is kind of nice that we're able to put everything inside one UI component. A bit of padding will probably be needed, but I guess we're also going to add this just after. So next, they say configure date picker so that you can select a date in the future because birthdays can only be in the past. So the last argument, display components date, sets the picker to display only the control for the date. You can also specify hour and minute. So sorry, it's moving on to another topic that is still connected. So it's about how can you prevent being able to choose the hour and minute. So you can also specify hour and minute or hour, minute, and second to specify controls for the time. To let someone pick a date with full precision, you can combine them. So date, hour, minute, and second. So let's see how we're going to do that. So for now, we only had the selection here, but we are adding new arguments. So we are adding the argument in so that we can say what range of dates are valid dates. And so it's date.distantPath and date.now, the interval. So let's see, date.distantPath, it's a value representing a date in the distant past. So something that is, I guess, maybe not the minimum date that you can represent in the past, but something kind of like integer min, I guess. Would be interesting to know what date it actually corresponds to. We're going to try it just after. So let's see. So now you can see that we cannot select any date in the future, because if I remove this change, now you can see I can select in the future without problem, but as soon as I put it back, so the range of valid dates, then everything in the future is no longer valid. So that makes total sense. And then if I want to disallow being able to choose the time, I can say, so I could say only allow the hour and minute, actually. But here, what I'm interested in allowing is only the date. So like that. That makes sense. And so I was saying, let's see what we have in date. So like that. So if I say distant past, you can see that. So interestingly, distant past, oh yes, it's this one. So it's 1st January 1st. So first day in the AD era. Okay. And what is distant future then? Okay, it's the year 4000. So in a long time, but not that long. I would have expected maybe like 9000 or 9999, something like that. But it's not that far in the future, actually. But I guess it makes sense because for any practical application, the year 4000, like if you're writing, for instance, a project management tool, if your users are scheduling tasks that need to finish 2000 years from now, I guess there is something wrong because your users are not planning your project correctly. Like, I'm not a project manager, but I think if you have deadlines for 2000 years in the future, something is wrong with your project management. Okay, let's go back to the tutorial. All right, so we made all of these changes. And now we just need to add a save button that creates a new friend model. So new friend is an instance of friend that contains the entered name and birthday. Recall that friend is not a view and has no body. It models those two pieces of data. So they are highlighting the fact that there is a difference between views, which are also structs, and basic structs, which only model data with no information about how this data should be displayed in the UI. So let's add the button save like that. So I'm copying the code and pasting it in the VStack. So we have the save button right here. And for now, it does nothing. I mean, it just creates a local variable, but we still need to, I guess, append the value to the friends array. So I guess that's what's going to come next. So let's see. Add the new friend to the array that powers the list. So indeed, friends.append new friend. So it's easy enough. I will write it myself. So friends.append new friend, like that. All right. Let's see. And append places a new friend at the end of the array, as the name suggests. The change to the array triggers the SwiftUI update, and the name is rendered at the bottom of the list. So let's see. I'm gonna add myself, so Vincent, and when was I born? I was born in 1990, July and 31st, like that. All right, I've successfully added myself to the list. All right. Now they say reset the entry state value. So for the data entry by doing new name equal the empty string and new date equal now. So like that. All right. And we can see that as soon as I made a change, the data I had added was removed because it was not persisted. And so the refresh of the SwiftUI preview was equivalent to relaunching the app. And so data was not persisted across app launches. Okay. Finally, add padding and style the safe area to complete the data entry UI. So we add padding and background bar. What does this do? So the bar styles the background in the same style as a system toolbar. You'll learn more about toolbars in the next tutorial, all right, which we might or might not cover this evening. So we apply this to the VStack. So the VStack ends here. So I put it like that. Okay, so it's indeed much better to have the UI like this at the bottom with the nice padding. Okay. And finally, launch the simulator and add a few friends. Relaunch the simulator to see your new friends have disappeared. In the next section, we are finally going to enter the data using, save the data using Swift Data. So this first part was actually more of a SwiftUI reminder than an introduction to Swift Data. So I'm launching the simulator for the first time. I see an interesting comment, so let me display it. So it's telling that Apple's docs use this form on the bottom of the list rather than a new view or sheet item. Then they'll have to explain why you can't cancel changes to a binding model. So yeah, that's what I was mentioning a bit earlier. I think the reason why they made that choice is also because it allows you to eliminate a lot of the complexity of how do you handle the data flow between two views, which, to be fair, is more of a SwiftUI topic than a Swift Data topic. So I understand why they simplified it, but indeed, you're right to mention that when doing so, you hide a lot of complexity under the rug, definitely. Actually, Apple released like 2 years ago a tutorial on SwiftUI. I covered it, so in August 2022 on my channel, I have a previous live stream about it, and they show at one point how to build a kind of views to create a new piece of data. And I remember that they had made a great job at explaining the pattern, and it was done pretty well. So I would really recommend checking that out because honestly, Apple had done a great job explaining this, and we know that Apple isn't always the best at explaining like architectural patterns, but for once they had done it. So I cannot write the link because I'm doing the live stream, but you can check on my channel a live stream I did during August 2022, and it was about getting started with SwiftUI. So that should be fairly easy to find because I've done only one SwiftUI related live stream in the summer of 2022. So I think you will be able to find it. But thanks for your remark because it allowed me to mention this very interesting tutorial. So let's go back. We are in the simulator now. So I'm going to write my name. Then I'm going to pick. I'm not going to put back the. I mean, yes, I've started to put back the. Oh, you can see, interestingly, I wanted to go to July, but I can't because for now, July 2024 is in the future. So you need to first put the year correctly. So I need to put the year first, then the month, July. All right, let's put the correct day. All right, so I've added myself. And you can see that if I go back to the Springboard and come back again, data is still here because the app hasn't been killed. But if I kill the app and then relaunch it, then data has disappeared because it wasn't persisted across app launches. And this is what the next part. Nice to see that we use SwiftUI, but we have like constraints that are broken in the under the hood UI kit. Always nice to see that. Let me go back to the tutorial. Next section is going to be about how to convert the struct to a SwiftUI data model. So how do we convert this simple struct into a data model that can be persisted using Swift data? So an app to help you remember birthdays isn't much use if it doesn't store the data you enter. We're going to use the Swift data framework to create and store instances of friends so they are still there when the app is relaunched. So step 1 is open the friend file and get access to Swift data by importing it. Swift data provides tools to model the data in your app and to use persistence to save your data so that it doesn't disappear when someone leaves the app. So let's do that change. So let me go back to Xcode, the friend.swift file. So import Swift data like this. Then what do I do next? Next, we need to add the @model macro notation above the friend structure. Swift data gives you access to the @model macro. Macros modify existing code with new functionality. In this case, @model converts a Swift class into a stored model managed by Swift data. Interesting that they use the word class here when we've actually defined a struct. Either it's a mistake or there is something more to it. Macros had hidden code. We're going to see how to see that hidden code just after, which may have requirements that cause errors until they are fulfilled. You'll find and resolve those errors in the next step. So let's go about adding this macro. By the way, if you're curious on let me move back the Xcode window so that you can see what I'm doing. All right. So we can see that there are some errors because @model requires an initializer to be provided for friends. And can I expand it? No, I can't expand. Oh, yes. So we can see that what model does is that it adds another macro persisted property to each property. We can see that there is an underscore in front of it, which normally indicates a private macro. Then we can see something that is transient, something that is not persisted, which is the backing data. So I guess it's how data is stored on the disk. Could be a JSON, could be a binary serialization. Then we can see that there is a property for the persistent backing data. Okay. And actually, this, when it's called, it just like sets what's above. All right. Then we have the schema metadata. So an array of the metadata of each property being stored. So we can see the corresponding key path, for instance, potential default values. Okay. And then an init that takes the backing data. So this is equivalent to the init with decoder that you would find when using Decodable, for instance. Okay. Interesting. Maybe this will be replaced once everything will be correctly set. And then something transient, which is the observation registrar. So it's what's used in order to be able to notify observers like a SwiftUI view that the data has changed. And finally, there is this thing right here, Swift data, no type. Okay. And let's see what this thing here does. So it creates actually a transient property of type Swift data no type. And then we have all of this code here being used to observe when there are changes. So I won't go into the detail of this part because, to be honest, I don't know it that much and it would take a bit of time to go over it step by step. And it's not the focus of this live stream. It's about getting started with core data, with Swift data, and not about mastering all of the details of Swift data. Just wanted to say that if you're curious about how to create your own macros, I did a live stream about this a few weeks ago, so you can also find that content on my channel where we implement a macro to check whether or not a string contains a valid URL. But in the meantime, let's go back to the tutorial. So next step is to choose to do product build to build your project. We're going to notice several errors, some informing you that @model requires friend to be a class instead of a struct. So make friend a class. So the usage of class actually wasn't a mistake. What's interesting is that we don't have the error telling us to make it a class rather than a struct. And here I think they explain why we need to make this change. So they say that a class and a struct both hold data, but instances of a class have a built-in identity that instances of a struct don't have. Swift Data uses this identity to share its data, its model data across the entire app to any view that needs it. When any view modifies a model, Swift Data sees those changes immediately. So the logic here is kind of like the same than when you have to use a class to implement an observable object in SwiftUI. It's the kind of same logic that you need to have an object that has an identity, because when you have a struct, if you have two structs with the same properties, they are virtually indistinguishable from each other, the same way that if you have two integers, two integer property holding the value 24, they hold the same thing. All of the integer property that hold the value 24, they hold the same value. There isn't one different instance of 24 of the integer 24 for each of the property. It turns out that when you want to model data, you need to have this if you want to be able to keep track of changes efficiently. And so that's why you need to have this identity, which the identity is actually the address in memory of the instance that's being used, because it's an identifier that you get for free when creating an instance in memory. So let's turn this struct into a class. All right. So now we have an error that says that we need to provide an initializer, and I think even if I remove this, I would still get it, because you need to provide an initializer for a class. So let's see. We need to add an initializer to friend, then build your project again to see that the errors are resolved. And they say that an initializer creates an instance of a type by assigning values to every property. So I guess you are familiar with it already. For structures, Swift generates an initializer with arguments matching each of its properties, which we call the member-wise initializer, but classes don't get auto-generated initializers, so you need to create one. Remember, you can just do a right-click, refactor, and generate member-wise initializer like this. Actually, this kind of fails because it also puts the data that you don't want to have to deal with, so you need to remove that part, which is about the data that is generated under the hood by Swift Data. Interesting to see that this was added when doing the refactor in Xcode. Let me just move it a bit like that. All right. So we have what we needed. Perfect. And now I'm supposed to be able to build successfully the project. Let's see. Yes, it appeared like off screen, but it said build build succeeded. Let's move on to the next section. So now time to connect Swift Data and SwiftUI, so the exciting part. So we're going to learn to power SwiftUI with a Swift Data model by upgrading the add_state array to Swift Data queries and operations. Birthdays won't build until you complete all the steps in this section, so don't get discouraged when you see errors as you work through the steps. You'll need to set up a container, change your add_state array to use Swift Data, and then save new friends correctly before you see the app working again. So let's get at it. So step 1, in Birthdays app, we need to import Swift Data, then connect Swift Data and SwiftUI using the modifier model container and the friend model, which is the meta type representing the type friend. Think of the container as a translator between where the friend data is stored and the content view on screen. Friend.self references the type friend rather than a specific friend. So you can see this as your data model. The container uses the type blueprint to understand how the model should be saved. Should be saved and also should be read from what has been saved before. So let's do that. So we need to go into the file birthdays app like that. So we need to import Swift Data like that. And then was it on the window group? No, on the content view, we need to do model container, not context. So be careful. And then the for and friend dot self like this. All right, that seems correct. And so no, I am not an AI. I have seen a few people telling me this, which is kind of funny because some of you might know that I work for a company called Photoroom, which is an AI editing app company. But no, I am not an AI. And actually, uh, whether it's for me or even my voice, I've never used AI to generate anything in my content. So even when you hear me speak in a voiceover video, it's my actual voice. It's not like I didn't like record once and then use Descript to generate every time automatically. It's still me recording everything every time. But yes, when you see me drink, you know that I'm a real person. Or maybe a very smart AI that's been programmed to fool you by drinking from a cup that might not even exist. Maybe this is also AI generated. You can never know. I guess the technology isn't there yet, but honestly, in a few years, I'm sure it will become very, very hard to know what is AI generated and what is for real. But let's get back to the topic. So I made this change. Then in the content view, we need to import Swift data. Then add a similar model container in the preview, setting in memory to true. And previews should start in the same initial state every time they refresh. By specifying in memory as true, you tell the container to use an in-memory container. In memory refers to the storage mechanism. Data is stored only as long as the app is in memory. So in memory, it means in the RAM basically, and not on the disk. And yeah, exactly. How do I know that even myself, I'm not an AI? Maybe I'm an AI since the beginning and I'm not aware of it. Everything is possible, these days. So what do I need to change? I need to go into my content view. Let me hide the preview for now because they said it won't be working again until we've finished all of the steps. So importing Swift data. And then they said in the preview, set up a container. All right. So like that. So same code, model container for friend.self and in memory true. So of course, if you have a more complex data model, you can imagine that you would like to store this only once in your app so that when you change something, you don't have to go over all of the previews to update the value right here. Okay, next step. Change the annotation on your friends array from @state to @query to fetch friend instances stored in Swift data. As the name suggests, @query asks Swift data for an array of data, in this case an array of friend. When you update instances of friend stored in Swift data, the query updates your views just like @state property does. So it's like a query that fetches all of the instances of type friend stored in the database. Sample data in Swift data can't be created directly in a query. You'll add the sample data back once the errors are resolved at the end of this section. So we are also removing this sample data or initial data that we had created in code. And so we take the @state and we turn it into an @query. Once again, let's have a look. So actually, @query, I wanted to expand the macro, but it doesn't seem to be a macro. It seems to be more of a property wrapper, I guess. No, actually, it's a macro. It's a macro. Why couldn't I expand it then? Maybe I need to build first. Yeah, I don't have expand macro. We'll see if it gets back to it later. Or maybe query is very specific and Apple has chosen to prevent us from expanding what it generates. We'll see. All right. So what is the next step? So then step 4, Swift data requires a model context to save new items. So we're going to access the model context from the environment. So if you've ever used core data with SwiftUI, that might bring back some memory here. If you're curious after this live stream, by the way, to see how how core data works in SwiftUI, you can find on my channel a video I made. I think it was 3 years ago. I think it was at the beginning of 2021 with Donny Valls, where he showed how SwiftUI works with core data. it's kind of a nice video. Actually, I think he had done a great job of showing like the basics in less than an hour. So it can be interesting after this live stream to go back to it to compare actually and try and see what the differences are. But there was the same thing of getting a context from the environment. All right, and so what's a model context? A model context provides a connection between the view and the model container so that you can fetch, insert, and delete items in the container. The model container modifier, you add it to the content view, so this right here. Insert a model context into the SwiftUI environment, and that model context is accessible to all views under the container. All right. Remember that @environment only works in a view. So if you have a view model, you won't be able to use @environment within the view model to get your to get the model context. So something to keep in mind, because it's a very easy way to have something that doesn't work and not understand why. What's the next step? In your save button code, we're going to replace the local append method with one that inserts the new friend model into the model context. Inserting into the model context saves the new friend into the container. Since @query is also connected to the container, it will pick up and display the new friend without you explicitly adding new friend to the friends array. And @query, you can really understand it that it's a query, but really in the if you think about it in SQL sense, in SQL, you have queries and you also have views, and views are just named queries. And this is what would be called a view in SQL. So it's something that will dynamically return all of the friends stored in the database. So when you save a new friend, the value returned by the query gets updated automatically. So here we remove this, and instead we do, I guess it's called context. So we do context, I guess it's insert, and insert model, which is going to be, I guess it's going to be the new friend. Yes, just like that. All right. Interestingly, you can see that we don't need to, you don't need to provide the type. Think about, for instance, when you want, so no, it's the insert case. So I was more thinking when you want to decode something using decodable, you need to provide the type. Here you don't need to do it because the type can actually be inferred because it already knows that it's a friend. But it's the same thing with a JSON encoder in decodable. So actually, the comparison with decodable is doesn't make sense because they both work the same way. But I wanted to highlight the fact that this is type safe because here Swift knows that the type is friend. All right. What's step 6? Recreate your sample data inside a .task, then save the data into Swift data. So we're putting this into a task. That's interesting that we do it in the content view and not in the preview. But I guess this way it will also work in the simulator. And so we put it on a task that is just right here. So something like that. Let me make it be a bit more split across several lines so that you can read everything. And you can see that we are inserting the two hard-coded friends into the context. I guess in a real app, you would probably put this into an if debug, something like that, so that this code isn't run in production, of course. But for now, let's keep it simple. All right. And now let's say SwiftUI begins executing the code in a task before the view appears. Here, when you insert the model objects, @query picks them up and updates the friends property. And as an experiment, they say run the app in the simulator by choosing product run, then run the app again. Why do you think there are so many friends in the simulator compared to the preview? So let's see. Once again, the question, what is the shortcut to indent the code like I did? So to split the code across several lines, it's Control and M. So Control and M. So Control plus M like that. And no, it's not custom made. It was added in Xcode 15. So almost a year ago. One of my favorite shortcuts and one that is not that widely known. So I definitely need to make a GIF about it, so that I can show the world how to do it. So I'm making a screenshot so that I remember to create a GIF for it in the future. And actually, if you're curious to learn more shortcuts in Xcode, I've also made a live stream about this a few weeks ago called 65, I think, tips to use Xcode like a pro. So you can check the replay. And I added chapters for every single one of the 65 tips so that you can really see them at a glance. So I hope that you will enjoy it. So I think it's time to launch the app again into the simulator. So you can see we have the data being here. And if I relaunch, of course, since the task is running every single time, new data is being added again. And we can see that we have a problem because now in the list, we have several pieces of data with the same ID. So that's a problem. It's not a Swift data problem, but it's a Swift UI problem because remember, here we said that the ID is the name and IDs need to be unique by definition. And so it tells you that the list could very easily get confused about what kind of data it's displaying. All right, let's see what else they ask us to do into the tutorial because okay, now we're going to be able to do more stuff, but okay, at some point, I mean, I need to actually try to write some data. So let me put the simulator back up again. So gonna write my birthday again. Seems I missed doing that correctly. All right, so remember July 1990. What's nice is that there are rumors that in France they could release the Vision Pro during the summer. So there is a world where I'm able to buy myself a Vision Pro for my birthday, which would be pretty neat, I won't lie. So we'll see if that's indeed the case. Okay, so I added myself. And now if I kill the app and relaunch it, you can see that the data was persisted across launches. So Swift data worked as it was expected to work, which is pretty nice, honestly. Now let's see what they make us do next. So section 6, use model data to fill out the UI. So organize your friends by age, highlight those who have a birthday today, and display birthdays in a human readable format. So now we're going to do some kind of data manipulation. So Swift data provides each instances of a model type with its own identity, separate from its data. So separate from the data that represents it. So in your list, you can remove the explicit ID to use the identifier provided by @model. So @model makes your object conform to the identifiable protocol. And they say what I guess I was mentioning earlier is that we were using the name property to identify each instance of friends in the list, but now Swift data can identify the instances for you. Having two friends with the same name is no longer a problem. So we can go here in this code and remove the explicit ID, like that. All right, next, what do? We may have noticed the two sample friends don't always appear in the same order. Sort the list of friends chronologically using their birthdays. So in the query, we can add a sort argument and we pass in the key path to the property that we want to use for the sort. So here the birthday. Recall that dates are absolute points in time. A birth date in an earlier year will come before one in a later year, regardless of the months and days. Try adding another person with a birthday between Elton's and Jenny's. So recall that dates are absolute points in time. A birth date in an earlier year will come before one in a later year. Oh yes, what they're saying is that if you were born, like someone born in 1960, but in December, will still come before someone born in 1970, but in January, because you compare the year first, then the month, and then the day. All right, so let's try to add this sort argument here. So sort, and we have to say friend.birthday. What's interesting is that we have to specify the type, actually, even though it could have been inferred from here, but I guess since it's an array, maybe I'm asking a bit too much. What's interesting is that what if I had put something else, like, what if I had put like int.description, for instance? Yeah, it says requires that int conforms to persistent model, so it's able to catch you, but I'm wondering what would happen. Maybe you can put some invalid data right here, so that might be something that you want to watch out. So let's see what happens now. They should be sorted by increasing birthday, and you can see indeed first the 1970, then mine, and then the current one, so which is today. Okay, so actually with my data, I had done what they are asking in the tutorial. That's great. So let's get back to the tutorial. Let me hide the simulator. So step 3, in friend, add a complete property to calculate whether the friend's birthday is celebrated today. So we add this complete property. Let's see. So I need to go here, and it's called is birthday today, and it does calendar current is date in today, which is a built-in function. All right. And now that we have this, what do we make with it? First, we have a paragraph about a calendar translates an absolute point in time, so a date, into familiar units like years, months, minutes, and seconds. People across the world use many different calendar systems. Calendar.current accesses the calendar preference from the device running the app. So remember, I showed you earlier, you have the Gregorian calendar, you have the Hebrew calendar, you have the Japanese calendar, you have all of these calendars. Step 4, in content view, use is birthday today to draw attention to the name of any friend whose birthday is today with a bold text and a cake SF symbol. Is birthday today is available on any friend instance. The property is declared once in friend but used twice here in content view. So yeah, this is some very basic tutorial here. Grouping functionality into a logically connected type is a great way to keep code organized and discoverable. So they say basically don't write the full calendar.current is date in today in every instance. So they're teaching us what it means to factor out code, which I guess you're probably already familiar with. And they say that we can look through SF symbols for other party related symbols if we want. So here in the H tag, first we add this one right here. So like that, all right. And then also we put the friend's name in bold. It's bold if his birthday today is set to true. And so let's launch the simulator again. We can see indeed the one whose birthday is set to today has everything, the name in bold and the SF symbol on the left. All right, that's pretty cool. And we can move on to the next step. So next step is finally remove the task pre-populating your app with data. So this task right here, like that. Do they give some more context? And they say, launch the app in the simulator and experiment with your fully featured birthdays app. Add your friends' birthdays, see them sorted by birthday, and wish somebody a happy birthday if you can. So now, if we launch the app, we can see that indeed it has stopped adding new data every time that I launch the app, which is pretty nice. Now I guess, oh, we have a quiz. And I'm looking if next they will show us how to delete data. Otherwise, I will add this feature because it seems quite interesting to do it. So we have a quiz with 3 questions. So let's take it. So what does persistence mean? Never running out of storage space, saving to the cloud, saving data beyond the running lifetime of an app. So I think you've guessed it's the last one. It's saving data beyond the running lifetime of an app. Perfect. Which of these has all the pieces of a Swift date? So January 4th, 2000, January 4th, 2000 at midnight UTC, and the first Monday of January 2000. So it's this one because there is the time zone as the extra information. Interestingly, this one, if you add the time zone, I think it's also a fully specified date because there is only one first Monday in a month. So saying the first Monday of a month, in a way, it's equivalent to saying the number of the day because you can compute one from the other. Actually, there are formulas that gives you the day of the week given the number of the day. They are very interesting and quite complex. I had to do a project like that when I first started to learn computer science. So that's quite interesting to know that these formulas do exist. But yeah, calendars are deterministic, so it's not random at all. And of course, I clicked the wrong one, but I meant to click this one. And yeah, this one, the problem is that while it's descriptive, it's a single day, so you don't have the hour, actually. You have neither the hour nor the time zone. And you also need the time zone to know when something happened, because if I tell you this happened at 8 p.m., it's not the same point in time if it's 8 p.m. in France or 8 p.m. in Japan or 8 p.m. in the US. And different also between East Coast and West Coast of the US. So the time zone is very different. That's why data that you receive from a backend will very often contain the time zone, so that there is no ambiguity on that part. And last question, add query automatically updates when model objects change. Yes, we saw it. That's the whole point of using add query. I mean, the point is also to retrieve data from the persistent store, but if it didn't automatically update the UI, then the benefits would be quite limited. Okay, so next part is a wrap up. So let's cover it, and then we will. Then we're going to do the yeah. Then we have the part about deleting. Okay, the part. Okay. Then we have create, update, and delete data, and then relationship and queries. So actually, we have quite a lot of content to cover. So let's get at it. So wrap up, models, and persistence. So reflect on how you created a front data model that power the user interface using that model, and then use Swift Data to save the data across launches. So let's reflect on the concepts. So models represent an app's state outside of the view hierarchy, even across launches. You now have another powerful tool for assembling complex applications. Almost all apps use persistence of some form, and you know one way to make that happen. You probably already knew another way, which is to use the user defaults, but which are much more basic, because actually you could have stored what we've just done using Codable and user defaults, but then when we're going to start to introduce relationships between saved pieces of data, then you will see that Swift Data is much more powerful than user defaults. Then about frameworks. So the Swift Data framework provides tools to connect SwiftUI to storage. So we can see that we have SwiftUI, and then using the model context in the environment, data can be saved to the persistent store, and can also be read and shown in the UI using the add query macro. Swift Data won't be the only framework you import in your project. There are a variety of frameworks available to support a wide range of app functionality. Some examples are Swift Charts, Contacts, PhotoKit, but I guess you are probably familiar with this. By the way, I made a video about Swift Charts 2 years ago, a bit less than 2 years ago, if you want to check it out. It's a nice framework. It's a very nice and interesting framework, and it's iOS 16, but now iOS 16 as a minimum target is becoming more and more realistic. So it's more and more worth knowing about it. And what are the topics and skills covered? So representing real-world concepts as data models, like a person's name and their birthday. Using date picker, and calendar to work with dates. Positioning content on the screen using safe area insets. Formatting dates in text views. Swift Data model classes. Swift Data context. Using add query to populate interface. Using add environment to get important values from parent views. So to keep practicing, if you want to go further, you could extend your app by sorting the birthday list by name instead of birthday. This should be fairly easy. And adding a notes property to friends to plan how you'll celebrate a friend's birthday. This should also be easy, but should be interesting because there is also a UI element to it. If you want to change yourself, you can revisit one of the previous apps and replace the names the array of string with a model persisted by Swift Data. And if you want to learn more, you can read about structure and classes and initializers. All right. Now what's next? Swift Data can do much more than save and retrieve just one type of model. In the next tutorial, you will learn how to create and manage sample data, display and edit models in detail, and create flexible custom views for models. So let's go ahead. So now we're going to edit and navigate and create, update, and delete data. So when you base an app around a common data store, you should give people a way to create new items, update existing ones, and delete items they no longer need. In this chapter, you'll create an app to track a set of movies. To create the interface, you'll implement all three core actions: create, update, and delete, which you can often see being abbreviated under the acronym CRUD, C-R-U-D, for create, retrieve, update, and delete. And we actually already did create and retrieve. Now we will do update and delete also, in addition. In the following chapter, you'll extend the app by adding a list of friends and recording their favorite movies. So actually, we are creating a new project. So let's do that. I'm gonna get rid of this window and create a new project. So actually, I'm gonna keep the window because I need to size the new window appropriately, like that. All right. Now let me, okay, we only have the new project. Perfect. So this time it's going to be called Friends Favorite Movies. All right, so we're creating a new app, and you can see that this time we are choosing to use Swift Data for the storage. This way we have all of the basic building blocks already put in place for us. All right. So let's see what we get when we use Swift Data, and let's see. Yeah, you need to leave host in CloudKit unchecked. All right. Putting it on the desktop. And so you can see this time we have quite a bit more code. We have a full app with a navigation split view, a list, some items being stored. What do these items contain? They contain just a timestamp, so the minimal piece of information that you can save. And basically, when you do plus, you save the current timestamp to a list. So I guess it's the hello world of the Swift Data realm, and you can see that what's interesting is that we already have the primitives to add an item, what we've done, but also to delete an item like that. So that's pretty cool to have this already built in. But besides that, the code looks very similar to what we've done before. Okay. So try out the previews, what we've done. You can tap the add button in the top right corner, so the plus icon, to add items. To view an item by itself, tap its list row. To delete an item, swipe left on the row. The edit button puts the view in edit mode, for which the list is configured to display a delete control on each row. So I think we can also do something like that. Yes, we can also swipe to delete. All right. The Swift Data app template uses a navigation hierarchy to display data that has a parent-child relationship. The list of items is a parent view. The navigation link provides a child destination view in its first closure. So you can see that the parent has the list of items, and then navigation link is just a text, the child view, that uses the item that is iterated on to build the row. So this way, in the child view, you have only one item. Okay. The list of items is a parent view. The navigation link provides the child destination in its first closure, which people see when they tap the item in the list, what I've just showed you. The list adds chevron. I don't know how you pronounce this in English. It's what I call a disclosure indicator, because it's how it used to be called in UIKit, to any row with a navigation link. And in the note, navigation hierarchies are very common. When screen width is limited, they are represented as a stack of items with new child items appearing on top of their parents. So virtually, like almost all iOS apps use navigation at one point or another. People can tap the back button in navigation bar or swipe from the left edge of the screen to go back to the view hierarchy. And maybe something that you didn't know is that if you stay pressed on back, you can pop several layers at a time. So stay pressed on back, and then you can pop several views at a time. So that's a nice trick that you can use in your favorite iOS app because it's a feature of iOS. So I guess most apps have it unless they have like explicitly disabled it, but I'm not even sure that you can do it. But it's good to know that people can pop several view controllers at once if they want to. Okay, now create a movie model. So in this app, you'll keep track of a list of movies. Start by creating the data model to represent the movies people will track. Rather than deleting the item file provided by the template and making a new movie file, you can rename the existing type and let Xcode handle some of the work for you. So we're going to use the refactor. So to rename item. And so we are going to rename the item. So we go into item here. Okay. And so how do we do it? Okay, click in the word item here and do refactor rename, all right? Oh, here you can, I didn't know about that. You can add something to be refactored in addition if you want, okay? Didn't know about that. Nice that they show that you can do it. And then we're going to call it movie, all right? Let me call it movie, okay? And then return. All right, so we've done the renaming. Then we use the renaming feature in Xcode again to change timestamp to release date. And they say, Xcode didn't rename the timestamp argument initializer. This is not an error. The timestamp property is independent of the name of the argument in the initializer. So let's do refactor rename again. Okay, so like that. We can see that it renames across several files, which is the advantage of using rename rather than just an edit and replace all in the file. Okay, and here indeed the name wasn't updated, so we need to do it manually, like that. Okay. Then we add a property oh, actually they don't make the change. So you know what? I'm going to keep the same code just in case that I don't introduce a mistake. Then we add a property movie to store the title of the movie, right? So like that. Xcode displays an error to tell you that all properties of the class must be initialized, meaning that they must be assigned values. Notice that the auto-generated initializer doesn't assign a value to your new title property. So rather than adding the existing initializer, let Xcode help you. Start by deleting the initializer, so like that. Now start typing init, wait for Xcode to provide code completion suggestions, then choose this one right here. So like that, nice. Even easier than when earlier I did refactor generate member-wise initializer. What's interesting is that when I did the generate member-wise, it also added this extra argument which we don't want with SwiftData. And when using the other approach, it didn't. So it's interesting to see that this seems to be smarter than doing the right-click refactor, and it doesn't trigger the same code under the hood. So nice to see this little kind of a difference. Okay, so Xcode generates the code to initialize all properties of a movie. And inside the initializer, the keyword self refers to the instance that's being created. I guess you are already familiar with this. Now we have errors to fix in the content view. So use the renaming feature to rename the items property to movies. So let's go in the content view. I'm gonna hide the preview for now. So here, let's rename this to movies. All right. It will update the code in 3 places, which I showed briefly. Property definition, in the views body, and in the delete items method. So here, here, and here. Then here, I think I need to provide more arguments now. Yeah, because I kept... Oh, now it's called release date. Okay, so we'll also need to change the name. All right. Manually rename the variable inside the for each closure to movie, then update the navigation link to display the movie's title. So I can do that here, just call it movie. And then here we're going to display the movie title like that. it's not happy about the type here because there is also a problem here. And so, yeah, movie title. Okay, so actually, just movie title because here there is a format, but the format no longer makes any sense. So just movie title like that. Okay, now it's happy. Perfect. Okay, and this tells us that the label closure of the navigation link holds the view that the list displays. So this is the destination, and this is what the navigation link actually shows. So you can see it as a button where this is what the button shows, and when you tap the button, it navigates to this view. Okay, step 10, fix the call to the movie. Let me hide this. Fix the call to the movie initializer fix the call to the movie initializer in add item. Okay, so it's here. So in add item, I need to create a new movie. Yes, with the correct arguments. So for now, the title is still hard-coded and the release date is now. Okay. So with this change, you've corrected the final error. Verified you can add and delete movies in the preview. So let's see. Now the preview should be working again. So let me run the code again in the preview. You can see that it's working in the preview. All right, perfect. Then use the renaming feature to change the add item method to add movie. Be sure it is renamed as at its declaration site and where it's used in the toolbar. So let's be here and do refactor rename. We have the two occurrences and we call it add movie. Perfect. Step 12, update the detailed closure of the navigation split view to display the appropriate message. You won't see a change in the preview, so that's because the navigation split view in this app displays a sidebar and a detail. The sidebar often contains a list, while the detail has a navigation stack onto which you push items. The detail closure holds the root view of the navigation stack. It typically provides a view that people see when nothing is selected in the sidebar. On iPhone, in portrait orientation, a split view collapses into one column. The detail column is hidden until you push an item onto the stack using the navigation link. So you'll never see select a movie in the detail view, but on devices with wide enough screens, the split view can display both its sidebar and detail, so when running on an iPad, for instance. So this is a bit confusing if you've never used split view controllers, but first let me update this. And then, so like that. Why is everything broken now? Okay, it's back to working. And just if I change the device to an iPad, for instance. So it needs to boot up an iPad simulator. So it's going to take a few seconds. So I will go back to the tutorial while it does this, but I want to show you what the split view actually does. Next step is going to be to add a navigation bar, navigation title for the sidebar. So we're going to add a navigation title just above the toolbar modifier. So like that. Okay, so the iPad has loaded. And so why is it not working anymore? If I go back, fail to build. Build succeeded, so I guess it's maybe something isn't refreshed. Okay, so now we have the title here, and I wanted to show you on an iPad. Yeah, so you have this thing on the left, and so this is why you would select movies, and when you select them, it's going to push the details on the detail view. So this is very similar to how the Mail app, for instance, looks like on iPad, and you can see that if I remove and put back the preview, at the beginning, since nothing is selected, you have this text that is displayed here on the screen. I'm trying to see if I can do it in landscape left. Yeah, in landscape left, you would have the sidebar always visible. So this way, it makes a bit more sense the way everything is organized. So that's why I'm going to use an iPad. Feels better when you want to demo navigation split view. All right. So this, I've done it. And they say, remember, there are two details view. The root detail view is in the detail closure of the navigation split view, and navigation link pushes its destination onto the view stack. So we want to add also titles for the detail view. So here we have a title for the detail view when something has been pushed. So here, and another one for when nothing has been pushed. Turns out that they are the same, but they need to be set in different places. So this is the one we've just set. And here, this is the other one that's being shown because now a movie has been selected. Okay, now use a class to provide sample data. So you can add new movies in the content view preview, but each time you edit the code, the preview reloads and the items disappear. That's because the preview is using a model container with no persistence. When the preview reloads, it recreates its model container with a fresh, empty set of data, which is great to always have the same starting point, but bad because you don't have any initial data. In this section, you'll create permanent sample data. That doesn't interfere with the persisted data store. All your previews will use this data so you can see your changes. So let's try and do that. So we'll create a new Swift file called sample data. So let's go. New Swift file called sample data. All right. We're going to import Swift data and create a class called sample data. Okay. It will be a model container that provides sample movies. In the previous tutorial, we created a model container using the .model container modifier. Here, we're going to build it explicitly without relying on the modifier. That way, instead of needing to repeat sample data code in many places, we can just create and manage our sample data in one place, then use it in all our previews, which is a pretty good practice. So we create a constant property to hold the model container. Okay, like that. This model container will store its data in memory without persisting it. So then we create an empty initializer. If we use code completion, Xcode will suggest a model context. If we use code completion, Xcode will suggest a model context parameter for the initializer, but we don't want that. We want an init with no argument, because I guess we will create the model container ourselves. So we're going like that. And then here, so they say switch to the friend's favorite app file and copy all the code inside the shared model container closure. Go back to sample data and paste the code into the initializer. Okay, so inside the model container closure, so there is some code to create the stack, actually. Okay, so that's the code that's used to create the model container that's used when launching the app. So we're asked to copy it and put it in the init. So it creates a schema using the type movie, then model configuration. So I guess here we're going to set this to true at some point. Okay, so let's go over the different things. So change the line that returns the model container. Instead, we assign it to the model container property. So instead of return, we do model container equal. Okay. The code you copied from Friend's favorite movies app was similar to a compute property. It returned the value, but you never return the value from an initializer. And also, you need to initialize all the properties. Changing the return to an assignment fixes both those issues. Okay. Step 7, change the model configuration to store its data in memory only without persisting it to disk. So as I was saying, we change this false into a true. All right. And then create a shared instance of the sample data class and declare the initializer as private. The static keyword defines the shared property as belonging to the class itself, not each individual instance. So this is explaining what a shared instance is. To access this property, you'll write sample data.shared. Okay. Let me copy paste just because I don't want to make mistakes. So like that. Then we make the init private. Okay. You mark initializer as private so that instances of sample data can only be created from within the sample data class itself. In this case, the single shared instance right here is the only one you create, which ensures that shared is the only instance of sample data, something also known as a singleton. This is a common way to create globally shared objects. Okay. One thing that's bugging me a bit is that in a real app, you wouldn't want to duplicate here the schema, because if it changes in one place, you want to make sure that it gets updated in both. So you probably would like to have this schema be shared in a property accessible both here and here. That's a detail, but still an important detail that I wanted to mention. Okay. Next step is to make your upcoming code a little more concise, create a complete property to access the main context of the model container. So people will only want to interact with the context of the model container. So we make it easy to access through a complete property, which access model container.main context. We have an error, but I guess they will tell us how to solve it just after. Yeah, Xcode displays an error saying that you should access the main context property of model container from the main actor. The error is related to Swift concurrency, a way to execute several tasks at the same time. Swift uses actors to manage code that runs concurrently. So if you're not familiar what an actor is, I have a video on my channel that explains in 90 seconds, I think, what an actor is. So I recommend that you check it out if you want to learn what an actor is and what is its purpose. So we fix the error by annotating the sample data class with @main_actor. And with our annotation, we are declaring that all code in this class must run on the main actor, including access to the main context property. Since all the Swift UI code in an app runs on the main actor by default, we've satisfied the condition. So main actor, you can understand it as the main thread of the app. So @main actor, like that. Trying to build the app, successfully built. That's great. Okay, now creating the sample data. Now that we've created a system for managing sample data and supplying it to previews, we need to create the sample data itself. In this section, we'll create sample movie data and insert it into the sample data model context. So in movie, we're going to declare an array to hold your favorite movies and store them in a static property named sample data. Add one movie to this array. So let's do it in a movie. Like that. And we have a sample data right here. Okay. So in the node, we are initializing release date using an offset measured in seconds from the reference date. The reference date is a fixed point in time, January 1st, 2001. So interestingly, it's not the same one than the beginning of the epoch, which is January 1st, 1970, which allow apps to calculate and compare times in a consistent way. A negative time interval offset means you want a date before the reference date. Okay. Add additional sample movies to the array. So we can see it's an Apple tutorial because it's not real movies, because I guess they want to avoid issues with copyright or by saying that they prefer one movie over another. Okay. Step 3, return the sample data. So we create a new function to make the sample data. Okay. So I think it's more about, I mean, they say function to return the sample data. I think it's more like to consume it because it's called insert sample data. They explain what a function is, but I'm not going to read that because I guess you already know what a function is. Okay. So insert sample data. So we are back to the sample data class. All right. And then we're going to use a for loop to add each movie to the model context. Okay, same thing. I'm not going to write the detail about what a for loop is because I guess you are also familiar with it. And in the body of the for loop, we do context insert movie. All right. And so we are iterating over the sample data in defined in the type movie. Okay. And finally, we're going to save the context. And you can notice we do it only once at the end of the for loop because it's more optimized, basically. And they say we will get an error that says that the function can throw an error, which we will end up handle in the next steps. So after the for loop, we do context.save. And now we use the try keyword to call the save method. I'm skipping the part that explains how to handle errors in Swift, because now they will say, okay, put it into a do catch block. So putting it into a do catch block, so like that. And finally, in catch, we just print to the console sample data context failed to save. Okay. And then we call insert sample data method from the initializer. So after creating the model container. So like that. Insert sample data. Okay. So actually, I would say that this should also be private, because there is no reason someone should be able to call it to insert more data from outside of the type sample data. So I'm just making an executive decision and making it private. We'll see if it gets me in trouble later. And so now to see the sample data in action, open the content view and update its preview to use the shared instance of sample data. So we're going to go into the content view, and instead of creating a model container on the fly, the model container is going to be sample data dot shared dot model container. Let me split it across several lines. And so I guess if I resume the preview, I should see my sample data, yes, being displayed. Pretty cool. Pretty cool, that worked. All right. It's something that's definitely going to be very useful when you work on a real app, to have some actual data so that you can test when developing that everything works as expected. So now that we have data to display on the screen, we can continue with the interface. In this section, we're going to create a way to view and edit the details of a movie. We'll push this new view onto the navigation stack and from each list row. Okay. So in sample data, we create a new compute property to return a sample movie. This will make it easy to show a sample movie in previews. So it's just going to be the first item of the array. So we are back in sample data. Personally, I prefer to put it here, the property, because just to have the properties like all together makes more sense to me. Then we create a new SwiftUI view called movie detail. So this time, create a SwiftUI view and not a Swift file. So this one right here, and call it movie detail. This way, you have all of the basics of a view being created for you. Okay. We say that it receives a movie as an argument when being built, and then we display the title of the movie. So like that. Of course, here we need to provide a movie, and that's where we will do sample data.shared.movie. So movie sample data.shared.movie. And we can see that now it should display in the preview actual movie data. And let me go back to having an iPhone actually and put it back also like that. And maybe let's go back to dark mode and let's zoom in a bit. Yeah, I guess that will be better. Okay, we are ready to continue. All right, so then change the text view into a text field to let people edit. So we're going to see how to edit. So someone mentioned like bindings and things like that. I guess this is when we're going to see that. So change the text view into a text field to let people edit the movie title. You can pass a binding to a property of an instance using dot notation along with the $ prefix. So this is more of a SwiftUI thing than a Swift data thing. If you want to learn more about how this works in SwiftUI, I have a full series of live streams dedicated to teaching you the basics of SwiftUI, so you can check this out. So you can pass a binding property, okay? So I'm going to update this by being a text field so people can edit the title. And there is an error that we need to fix that states that you can't find a $movie property. That's because bindings aren't automatically created for every property of a view, and @model types don't provide them on their own. So we need to put @bindable here. So at bindable like that. So at bindable, that's interesting because it's something in Swift UI, but it's different from at binding that you might already be familiar with. Actually, it's the first time that I use at bindable, to be honest. And the at bindable annotation silently creates a $movie property, just as at state does with view state properties. Okay, so now the code should build. Oh, because we need to make it a var, of course, because it needs to be modifiable. Yes. Okay. Then embed the text field in a form, and you can use the form container view to print data and display for editing. It uses a grouped inset list style, which pushes content to the top and away from the edges and provides a nice contrasting background. So it's more about making the UI prettier. And I think you're right. Bindable is from the new observation framework, which I haven't covered in the live stream, but maybe in the future I should make a live stream about this very interesting framework. Okay, so I put this. Let me go back to the correct view because I'm getting lost with all of my windows. Okay, I put the text field just into a form. All right, let's do that like that. So I select the text field, open a curly brace, and put it into a form like that. And normally, we should see a much nicer UI now. Yes. So it's pushed to the top. There is padding and insets and everything. Okay. And we can edit the data, of course. All right. Then we're going to add a date picker to edit the movie's release date. All right. So let me split it across several lines like that. And you can see that this is linked to the release date property of the movie. So we can also change this now. That's pretty cool. You can see that it's been configured to only show the date components, just like we had done before. All right. What's the next step? We are adding a navigation title. Okay. And to see how this view will look when pushed on the navigation stack, update the preview by wrapping movie detail into a navigation stack. So here, so let's do both. So let's just add on the form navigation title, and then let's put this into a navigation stack like that. We can see the title, the large title appearing. Perfect. Okay. In the content view now, replace the text view and navigation title modifier with movie detail in the first closure of the navigation link. So I'm going back to the content view like that. And so here, I can replace all of this with the movie detail view, and I pass in a movie. So now I can navigate to my movie detail view. That's also pretty sweet. Okay. In the preview, select a movie, edit the title and a release date, then tap back to see the list again, add a movie or two with the plus, and edit their details. So if I change difficult cat by difficult dog, you can see that it's being saved. So that's pretty cool. Of course, I guess that whenever I'm going to relaunch the preview, that won't be persisted. Yeah, it's back to cat. So it's not persisted, but at least the change in the child view is carried back into the parent view. So we are indeed changing the data reliably, like it should, like we expect it to change. Okay, now add movies using a sheet. So earlier I was saying that putting everything into one view to add data is a bit of a suboptimal pattern when you start to deal with more complex data. It's great to see that here they are addressing the more complex use case. So now that you can edit movies, it's time to streamline adding new ones. You can take advantage of the detail view you've just created, presenting it modally in a sheet. You use a modal interface to focus people on a short, well-defined task. To continue, they must take an action to exit the interface. Creating a new movie is a great use case. SwiftUI provides several modal interfaces. The best choice for this task is to use a sheet. Sheets animate from the bottom of the screen, pushing the current view into the background, still visible but inactive by default. So in the content view, we're going to add a new asset property to hold the new movie. So this is the pattern that they were explaining in the other SwiftUI tutorial that I was mentioning before. So you're getting it here for free. That's great. They explain what an optional is, but I won't go over it because you probably already know what it does. And I want to focus on Swift data itself. So I've added the new property, all right. Then in the add movie method, we're going to change the new movie's title to an empty string and assign the instance to the new movie property. Okay. So we update add movie. So let's see. Now, right now in add movie, we create a new movie with a hard-coded title and insert it. And now what we do is that we create a new movie, empty string here, and then we insert it and we also put it as the new movie. Okay. The new movie being stored right here in the add state. So this new movie, since it's inserted, it's accessed by two things. It's accessed through the query, which catches all movies, including the new one, and also you can edit it by default here through the add state property. So let's see where this leads us. Then we're going to display a sheet for the new movie. Inside the closure, we use the movie parameter to display the detail view. So we are just reusing our detail view, except that this time we use it to edit the newly created movie. So we use the sheet modifier to present modally. So we put it just after the toolbar. So just here, like that. Okay. Let's see what they say. So you can trigger a sheet to appear when an optional property has a value. Oh, that's why. So when a new movie is set, then the sheet will be triggered. When the value is set to nil, the sheet is stowed away. You pass a binding to allow the sheet to set the property to nil, which happens automatically when the sheet is dismissed. So try adding a new movie. Unlike before, you can set the movie's title in the sheet before adding it to the list. Actually, we saw that it's being added to the list immediately, but this is hidden from the user. And you can drag the sheet down to dismiss it. So I'm going to run it in the simulator so you can try it. So I add a new movie. You see, you could see it appear before the sheet popped up, and then we can give it a name, like I don't know, like which movie, like Dune 2 seems like a popular name right now. And when I close it, you can see Dune 2 has been updated here. So that's great. We see we have errors in the console, which is never very reassuring when you're just following the tutorial. Okay, let's see if the tutorial addresses these errors or not. Then use the toolbar to add actions. So more of a SwiftUI thing here. So dragging isn't the ideal way to dismiss a sheet for editing a new item. It's not clear how to add the item when you're done editing, and there's no way to cancel. Sheets and other model interfaces usually have explicit controls to exit them. For example, before deleting an item, an app might display an alert with buttons labeled delete and cancel. For a sheet, you present such controls in a navigation bar. So at the top. So in the detail view, we're going to add a toolbar modifier, which can appear above or below the main content of the screen, and we can add controls in the toolbar and other views inside this closure right here. So we go into movie detail. So let's see. Let me go back to Xcode. Movie detail like that. So we put a toolbar here. Then we add a toolbar item to house a confirmation button. And when you tap this button to confirm adding a new movie, by specifying the item's placement semantically with confirmation action, you let SwiftUI choose the appropriate location for it. So imagine that it could be placed differently in an iPad, in an iPhone, running on the Mac, or even running on the Vision Pro. Let me also resume the preview so that we can see the thing appear. So we can't see it appear for now because we haven't given it any name. I mean, we haven't put anything inside. So now we add a button labeled done to the toolbar item. So we need to confirm that the button appears in the preview. And they say, you see, the toolbar modifier doesn't create that's interesting. The toolbar modifier doesn't create a toolbar. The navigation stack provides its own toolbar. The modifier adds its content similarly to the way that the navigation title also adds content to the navigation title provided by the navigation stack. So data is defined in the child view and consumed by the parent view. If you're curious as to how SwiftUI does this, it's probably through something called preference keys. And if you want to learn more about it, you can check out my live stream about learning SwiftUI and the one called, I think, Advanced Data Flows, which is where we cover what preference keys are and how they work. So we can see the button is appearing here on the top right. Okay. And now that we have the done button, we need a way to dismiss the sheet. So for this, we can get the dismiss closure from the environment, which will allow us to dismiss the view regardless of how it's being presented. So if it's pushed, it will be popped. If it's a model, it will be dismissed. And SwiftUI will take care of dismissing in the proper way. All right, and we call dismiss inside the action of the button. Okay. Here it does nothing because there is no other way there is no other view in the navigation stack, so there is nothing to pop to. Then we add a cancel button, so same logic than before, except that this time the placement is the cancellation action, and then cancel dismisses also. So we can see cancel on the left. You can see that done is in bold and cancel isn't. Okay. And finally, get the Swift data model context from the environment and use the model context to delete the movie when canceling. So when you cancel, you remove it. So remember, we added it proactively. Now we want to remove it. So in this case, it's going to be model context, delete model, and the model will be the movie. Okay. So when you present this view in a sheet to create a new movie, the content view has already inserted one into the context. To cancel, you need to remove it. The easiest place to do that is here inside the detail view, which handles the cancellation action. So now we can try it. And they say that if we do that, the preview will crash because the movie detail view in the preview doesn't have a model container. Oh yes, we haven't injected. Yes, if I click, the preview crashed. Okay. Oh, I even get the full error message and everything. You can fix the crash by adding a model container in the navigation stack in the preview. So like that. So let me fix this. All right. Now it no longer crashes. That's great. Okay. And now open the content view file to provide the toolbar to the sheet, wrap its detail view in a navigation stack. So we're going to go here, here, and wrap this into a navigation stack, like that. And so now, yeah, let's check that this works. So I'm launching the simulator again. What's weird is that I still have the done button here, which doesn't make sense, but at least you can see that dismisses properly. What's weird is that if I click cancel here, I remove the movie, which is not what you would expect. We're going to need to deal with it so that cancel and done are only displayed when showing modally. But now you can see if I cancel, the movie has been removed, and I can call it, so once again, Dune 2 and done. Okay, so it seems to work as expected. Just here, when it's not in the sheet, we should hide the toolbar. So let's see if this is what the tutorial makes us do next. Yes, adapt the detail view to different presentation context. So we present the movie detail in two ways: in a sheet when adding a new movie, and in navigation stack when editing a movie. In a sheet, the detail view should present the done and cancel buttons, but on a navigation stack, it should just let you dismiss with the built-in back button and the swipe to dismiss gesture. In this section, you'll remove the clutter from the navigation experience, adapting it to both contexts it's displayed in. All right. So we start by adding an isNew property to movie detail. So kind of like tracking the context in which the movie detail view is being displayed. So we have isNew. Okay. Then we create a custom initializer for detail view using a default value for the second parameter. So isNew. So let's copy and paste this also. So like that. Okay. And by using a default parameter, we avoid causing errors with existing code. That makes sense. Then wrap the toolbar items in an if statement to include them only when editing a new movie. The toolbar isn't visible anymore because the default value of the isNew parameter is false. And statements like if and if else can only be used to choose views, not modifiers by themselves. You can use if else statements to choose between two views with different sets of modifiers. That's because when you are inside the body, you are inside the result builder, and if else behave slightly differently in here. If you want to learn more about how result builders work in SwiftUI, you can check out the first video of my series about learning SwiftUI. So here we go here, and yeah, we need to put the if is new inside the toolbar because we can't put it here. It's not possible. We need to put it here. So if is new, and then let me move the entire code like that. Okay, and so now we just need to pass is new to true in the correct places. So add a second preview so you can see how the detail view looks in both configuration. Use a custom name to distinguish it from the first one. So that's great. It's showing us how to create two previews. So you can create another preview simply by adding another preview to the file, like that. So this is much simpler than it used to be now that we have the pound preview macro. And you can see movie detail and new movie. So new movie. And here it should be, we can call it like existing movie, for instance. And you can see the name here. And so here is new is set to false by default. And here, let me put it across several lines, is new is set to true. And we have the buttons being displayed. Perfect. Okay. And having two previews lets you see the view in both of the ways you'll use it. One to edit existing movies and the other one to create new ones. You can switch between previews using the buttons at the top of the canvas. So what I just did. Perfect. Step 5. In content view, pass true to the isNew parameter in the detail view presented from the sheet. So like that. So here. So true. Okay. And so now you can see when we navigate to an existing movie, we don't have the cancel and done. But when we create a new one, we have cancel and done. Okay. That seems to work as expected. Yeah, indeed. And finally, if people drag the sheet down to dismiss it, the movie isn't deleted from the context. Prevent people from dragging the sheet down to dismiss it by putting the modifier interactive dismiss disabled. So now let's go back to the simulator just to see what's gonna happen. Okay, so now you can't see, you can't, like, it's resisting. I can't close it like that. And I'm gonna call it, what other movies do we have these days? Not even sure. Dune 1, by lack of, of inspiration. And you can see it was added as it should. And if I do cancel, the movie is removed. If you look fast, you can still see the movie being created in the UI, which isn't perfect. In a real app, you would probably want to do something a little bit more evolved than this. Okay, and now the finishing touches. So Friends' favorite movies is ready to log movies, but you can improve the experience by adding screen titles to the navigation bar and displaying a helpful message to help people when the list of movies is empty. So in movie details, we're going to add a ternary condition operator to choose an appropriate navigation title based on context. So in movie detail, instead of always saying movie, so like that, movie, we're going to go in movie detail, and instead we will use a condition and say, I wanted to change this. So if it's new movie, otherwise just movie. And thanks to the several previews, you can see that we can test very easily that this is working as expected. That's perfect. To show the title in the new movie preview as it appears when presented modally, use the inline title display mode. So we are also... Oh yes, because when it's presented modally, we don't have the large title. So we can simulate this by saying navigation title, bar title, display mode, inline. So in this, no, it's in the new movie preview. So this way, we already simulate the way it appears, yes, when being shown in a sheet in the actual app. Perfect. And we see this behavior automatically when using the content view preview. Okay. Then what do we have? So people will see a blank screen when they launch the app for the first time. Let me show you that. So I'm going to delete both movies. So I'm deleting both movies. Indeed, the screen is blank and it's not clear that you need to click on the plus icon right here. So let's improve this. And actually, Apple in iOS 17, they also added a screen to deal with empty state. So maybe they will make us use this. We'll see. Oh no, they make us do it like the manual way. So what you can do is to say, okay, so we put the list into an if movies is not empty. So we take the list right here. So let's see. We take the list right here. It's the list all the way to, oh yeah, only the list. All right. So I take the list like that. No, completely messed what I wanted to do. Like that. Yes. And then I do it like this. Okay. So if the list of movies isn't empty, if the array movies isn't empty, display the list. And then we need an else. So then we're going to put this also into a group. And I think I skipped the explanation that they were giving. So we have an error because if is not a SwiftUI view, so you can't apply the modifier to it. And so you put it into a group. And a group is like a way to to group views together, but without any kind of impact on the layout. Yeah, they say it here. It's a simple container view that doesn't alter its content in any way. It's useful for wrapping conditionals and applying command modifiers to many views at once. Exactly what we've used it for. So we've used it like that. Okay. And now add an else clause within the group that displays a content unavailable. Okay, so yes. So the content unavailable is indeed the new view from Apple. I don't remember that you had to do the if else manually. That's why I was a bit confused. Okay. Actually, the else was already copied and pasted. All right. Let me realign everything, split across several lines, and relaunch the preview, or rather the app in the simulator, because we have data stored here. Okay, so we have no movies like that, and you can see that content unavailable view is indeed pretty nice. So making a little screenshot to remember me that I need to make content about this content unavailable view, because it's pretty sweet. Okay, so and now when I add a movie, so I'm not gonna change, I'm still going to keep with Dune 2. Okay, you can see that it's been switched to the actual list, and if I make it empty again, we are back to the empty view. All right. What do we do next? To preview the list as it appears when no movie has been added, add a new preview. Rather than giving it your sample data model, use just a model created on the fly. So we can also do that. That was another option, to create a new preview like that. And so if I resume the previews, you can see we have the preview. Interestingly, the preview for the empty state doesn't show anything. That's weird. Is it because of the dark mode? Oh, that's so weird to see that. By default, at least in the preview, here, this didn't work in dark mode. I wonder if it's a bug. I really wonder if it's a bug. Let me see in the actual simulator. Yeah, no, it works in the simulator, so I guess it's a bug of the preview, because like if a built-in component from Apple didn't work in dark mode, I would be surprised. Okay, seems to be a bug in the simulator. Okay. All right, let's check our understanding. So what are the three fundamental operations that directly manage the data in a Swift Data model container? So insert, update, and query, create, save, and delete, create, update, and delete. It's the last one, because here create and save, they are kind of like synonyms. So create, update, and delete. In just about every app, people will want to add new items, edit new items, or delete them. What is necessary to display items provided in the toolbar modifier at the top of the screen? So to ensure that the view is enclosed in navigation stack, either in the current view or a parent view, use the toolbar hidden modifier and pass false as the argument, add a navigation bar in the view's body. So it's to put it into a navigation stack, because navigation stack, they render the toolbar at the top of the screen. Other components might render the toolbar in a different place. Okay, and next question, how can you create model data that doesn't persist? So create a temporary model container. When creating the model container, pass through to the in-memory only parameter. When creating the model context, pass through to the in-memory model parameter. So what is the container or a context? Let's actually check. Let's go into the code. And it's a container that we are passing, not a context. Let's try and see and remember the difference between... so the container is the root object, and the context is part of the container. And the context manages the app schema and storage configuration. And the container manages... oh, no, the container manages app schema and storage configuration. And the context is what enables you to do the fetch, insert, and delete, and save the change to disk. Okay, so the container manages more things than just the context. Okay, so it's the container. Yeah, got it correctly. All right, so what's the wrap up for this part? Data editing and navigation. So we've learned to create and manage sample data, display and edit models in details, and create flexible custom views for models. So what have we learned? Multi-purpose detail view. That's a very interesting SwiftUI pattern. So we use the movie detail for both creating new movies and editing existing movies. Reusable and flexible components are fundamental building blocks for assembling more complex applications. Designing smaller views with a single purpose lets you break down a large app into smaller bits that are significantly easier to understand. Just as you'll create models to represent and drive the apps you create, you'll also create views to accomplish specific tasks. Then for navigation, we saw that Friends' Favorite Movies is our first app featuring navigation through a hierarchy of content. We learned how to present short, specific tasks in model interfaces to create new movies. So here it's task in the sense of a user, a task carried out by the user, not a task in the sense of calling the task modifier. And then we link the list to the detail page, passing in the movie to be edited. There's a limit to how much useful information can be packed into one screen, and navigation is an important way to help people tackle one thing at a time. So what have we covered? Reusable detail view for both creating and editing data, Xcode tools to refactor existing type and generate common code, defining sample data and reusing it across SwiftUI previews and a shared instance, manually creating a schema, model configuration, and model container, navigation hierarchies to display structured data using navigation ship, speed view, navigation stack, and navigation link, modifying data models with bindable, the form container view, displaying model interfaces using sheets, custom view initializers, rendering views conditionally using group. So some SwiftUI, but also some SwiftUI. Yeah, some SwiftUI, but also some Swift data. I meant to say some Swift data, but also some SwiftUI. It wasn't all about Swift data. And how could you go further? So you could extend the app and the expert will be about using relationships. All right. And if you wanted to change yourself, you could revisit the birthdays app we did before and upgrade the front-end UI by replacing the safe area inset at the bottom with a fully fledged detail view. And if you want to learn more, code along with Build an App with Swift Data to go over what you've learned in this tutorial and the previous tutorial. So, okay, it's the video from Apple. So the next part is the advanced the advanced features of Swift Data, like working with relationships between objects. I won't do it this evening because I'm looking at the time. Yeah, it's been like more than 2 hours, and actually I thought it was going to be a shorter tutorial. I had thought it would be like between 1 hour and 1 hour and a half. But as you can see, I'm starting to get tired also. So I'm going to pause here for this first part. And I guess for the more advanced part about how to work with relationships, I will do a part 2 either next Monday or the following Monday. But I'm kind of glad because I was a bit afraid that this tutorial would be a bit too superficial maybe, and it's definitely not superficial, it's very thorough, goes over everything step by step, so I'm very glad about that. And so here this time, so what have we covered? Yeah, we covered the basics of model and persistence, and we did like the create, update, and delete, and next time we will do relationship and queries, and we will have covered a pretty good amount of scope. So just have to say thank you for the people who joined during the live and interacted in the chat. And I just have to say, yeah, see you in either next week or in a couple of weeks for the next part of this Swift Data tutorial. Have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye. See you.